Everything is black and gold, black and gold tonight. Yellow pumpkin, yellow moon, yellow candlelight. Jet black hat with golden eyes, shadows black as ink. When the world turns black and gold, then it's Halloween.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That was Keith Carter with our opening song. I'd like to welcome you tonight for Festival of Ghost Stories. Festival of Ghost Stories has been going on for many years. It is a partnership with the City of Bloomington Parks and Recreation Department, of whom I represent, with the Monroe County Public Library and the Bloomington Storytellers Guild. You're going to hear a lot of great storytelling tonight, a lot of spooky tales, as well as some spooky songs to go along with them. And while you're doing that, please feel free to partake of the free cider that we have. We have both hot and not hot cider available just to your right over at the table near the shelter. Go ahead and go over there when you feel the chill dig in and you're looking for something warm. So here to kick us off and introduce the first storyteller. Please put your hands together and welcome to the stage representative of the Monroe County Public Library and the Bloomington Storytellers Guild, Stephanie Holman.
Oh, well done. Well done choosing your Friday evening. I am a children's librarian at the Ellettsville branch and a 25-year member of your Bloomington Storytellers Guild. I'd like to thank Bloomington Parks and Recreation for providing the stage, the wonderful sound folk who are going to make our voices waft all across the lawn so that you can just sit back and relax and let the words come to life and illustrate themselves in your own mind. And I'd like to thank you for the refreshments. There's volunteers up there. I'd like to thank the Monroe County Public Library for being our second partner in this venture. Not only do we have the wonderful community access television station here tonight filming our program so that you can watch it again and point it out to your friends, but also we have our adult services helping to advertise and promote this festival because it is for older kids, teenagers in particular, and adults. So we welcome you big kids here tonight because we really look forward to telling to grown-ups. We at the Bloomington Storytellers Guild have been telling lots of stories around the area this time of year and all year long to many an age, but this is the one we look forward to bringing out some of our more meaty tales. And I congratulate you once again for being here tonight, but I also just applaud this setting. I mean, could we ask for a better night? This is probably the most beautiful fall setting that we've had here in my 25 years. Let's literally applaud it. Let's do. I mean, it is to be celebrated. It is to be noted. We are not sitting on wet ground. It's not muddy. It's not windy. And Monroe County Public Library didn't have to come through with that rain location in the auditorium. So this is our setting. The mood will now begin to be created by 8 tellers. We have a concert of storytelling for you tonight, and we're going to get started right away with a person who is new to our Monroe County Public Library. Please help me welcome to the stage our new fabulous teen services manager, Kevin McDowell.
I watched The Others last night. Have you seen it? Raise your hand. Oh, good movie. Yeah, and it's just as creepy even when you know. I watched The Changeling the night before that. Who's seen that? I didn't even know. That was a mildly disturbing movie. But I like those movies that we watch this time of year. I only watch them this time of year. That are scary because of what you don't know and what you don't see. Like in Jaws, they don't show you the shark until 3/4 of the way through the movie, and it's still a scary movie. So this song is kind of cool and creepy because you don't know. You don't know who are you supposed to be afraid of and why right away. I didn't think the music was scary enough, so I changed it. No offense to Danny Dill and Mary John Wilkin. On a cold, dark night, someone was killed beneath the town hall light. There were few at the scene, but they all agreed that the slayer who ran looked a lot like me. The judge said, son, what is your alibi? If you were somewhere else, then you won't have to die. I spoke not a word, though it meant my life, for I had been in the arms of my best friend's wife. Nobody, she walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees. Nobody knows but me. The scaffold is high and eternity near. She stood on the crowd and shed not a tear. But late at night, when the cold winds blows in a long black veil, she cries over my bones. She walks these hills in a long black veil. She visits my grave when the night winds wail. Nobody knows, nobody sees. Nobody this one from a true story from the life and times of yours truly. When the night wind blows so cold you can feel it through your knees underneath your clothes, and the moon is large and it shines so bright you can see it through your lids when they're closed, and the sound of your feet shuffling through the fallen leaves is a sound that can inspire on a night like tonight when everything's just right for dancing in a circle round the fire. Everyone dance and kick your legs up to the sky above the flames as they blaze high. Come watch us fly. It was late one night many moons ago when we first saw the goblins and the ghouls. They never seemed to tire as they danced around the fire, those terrifying dancing fools. They were skipping and a leaping in a reckless abandon, which of course we did admire. We joined them that night after they invited us to dance in a circle round the fire. Everyone dance and kick your legs up to the sky above the flames as they blaze high. Come watch us fly higher and higher and higher. Ooh, 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 do, 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 Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lisa Champelli, and I'm a member of the Bloomington Storytellers Guild. And I must echo Stephanie's praise for this gorgeous evening. I think it is perhaps one of the prettiest nights we've ever had, Festival of Ghost Stories. And at first I was thinking perhaps it was too pretty, perhaps it was too cheery for our setting tonight. But after Kevin's eerie songs, and as dark descends, and you can see the shadows lengthening up the hill there, and you begin to wonder what might be lurking in the shadows in the park, what might be hiding behind the trees. For you see, there was once an old man and an old woman and a little girl who lived way out near the deep, dark, piney woods in a house all made of hemp stalks. And they lived in this house with their little dog, who was called Little Dog Turpie. And all around the house in the deep, dark, piney woods, there lived a lot of hobias. Now, hobias are fearsome beasts. They're bigger than dogs, but smaller than bears, and they have red eyes that glow in the dark and long, sharp claws. And every now and then, they come creeping out of the woods, circling through the parks, and sneaking up to people's homes. And they gobble up little boys, and they gobble up little girls. And they gobble up big folks too, so don't think you're safe. And one night, the hobias did come out of the woods, and they crept up to the house all made of hemstocks, where the old man and the old woman and the little girl lived with their little dog Turpie. And the Hobias went crawling around the house, muttering, Hobias, Hobias, Hobias. Tear down the hemp stalks, gobble up the old man, gobble up the old woman, and carry off the little girl. But little dog Turpie heard the Hobias, and little dog Turpie barked loud and louder and frightened the Hobias away. But this barking woke the old man from his slumber. He rolled over in his bed and said to his wife, Wife, I cannot sleep nor slumber when little dog Turpie barks loud and louder. If I live till morning, I'm going to cut off his tail. And I am afraid that that mean old man did indeed live till morning. And do you know what he did? He cut off little dog Turpie's tail. And that night the Hobias came back. They came sneaking out of the woods. They snuck around the house howling, Hobias, Hobias, Hobias. Tear down the hemp stalks, gobble up the old man, gobble up the old woman, and carry off the little girl. And little dog Turpie again barked loud and louder. And this woke the old man from his slumber, and again he said, Wife, I cannot sleep nor slumber when little dog Turpie barks loud and louder. If I live till morning, I'm going to cut off his front legs. And that horrid old man lived till morning, and he did indeed cut off little dog Turpie's front legs. And the Hobias came back again this night. They came marching around the house, chanting, Hobias, Hobias, Hobias. Tear down the hemp stalks, gobble up the old man, gobble up the old woman, carry off the little girl. And again, little dog Turpie barked loud and louder and frightened the Hobias away. But this woke the old man from his slumber, and he shouted, Wife, I cannot sleep nor slumber when little dog Turpie barks loud and louder. If I live till morning, I'm going to cut off his hind legs. And he did indeed live till morning, and he did cut off little dog Turpie's hind legs. And that night the Hobias came back. They came careening around the house, whooping and hollering, Hobias, Hobias, Hobias. Tear down the hemp stalks, gobble up the old man, gobble up the old woman, and carry off the little girl. And little dog Turpie, one time again, he barked loud and louder and frightened the Hobias away. But this woke the old man from his slumber, and he shouted, Wife, I cannot sleep nor slumber when little dog Turpie barks loud and louder. If I live till morning, I'm going to cut off his head. And that horrid old man lived till morning, and he cut off little dog Turpie's head. And that night, the Hobias came back. They came rushing out of the woods, rushing around the house, chanting wildly in a wild frenzy, Hobias, Hobias, Hobias. Tear down the hemp stalks, gobble up the old man, gobble up the old woman, carry off the little girl. And did little dog Turpie bark loud and louder to frighten the Hobias away? No, of course not. Because little dog Turpie had no head to bark with. And so the Hobias came, and they gobbled up the old man, gobbled up the old woman, and carried off the little girl. They put her in a sack, they stuffed her down into a stack, and they tied it tight, and they carried her deep into the piney woods, and they hung that sack high up in a tree, and then they danced around the tree until daylight, and they slept during the day. And then they came back at night and they danced some more. And then they took down the bag and they opened it up and they looked into it and they shouted, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." And then they tied the bag back up and they hung it back up in the tree. And they left the little girl there. And she cried. She cried for herself. She cried for her little dog Turpie and her family. And she cried to be left all alone in that bag by herself. She cried all night and all day until midday, when a young woman came hiking through the woods with her great big dog. And she heard the little girl crying. She heard her up in the tree, and she climbed up and she took the bag down and she opened it up and she took out the little girl. She gave her some water and listened to her story. And then she put into the bag her own great big dog. And with the little girl together, they hung the bag back up into the tree and they waited. And at nightfall, the Hobias returned. They danced around the tree and they took down the bag and they opened it up and they shouted into it, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." And out jumped the great big dog and gobbled up all the Hobias. And so now, you and I need not be afraid of what might be lurking in the shadows in the park or hiding behind the trees, because there are no more Hobias.
I'm R.J. Trubet, and I'm going to tell you about this little old woman who was traveling alone late one night when her car got into trouble, and her car stopped completely right in front of this big old dark castle. "Well, how lucky I am," she said, when her knock was answered, and they invited her in and offered her a room for the night. Now, the little old lady had heard enough about ghosts in big old dark castles, and so when she got ready for bed, she determined that she would check the room carefully for ghosts. First, she went to the large oak wardrobe. And she opened the doors, flung them open, and looked carefully. Ah, nobody here but me. And then she went over to the curtains, and she shook them and pulled them apart. Ah, nobody here but me. And then she went to the bed, and she stooped way down so that she could look absolutely under. Ah, nobody here but me. Content, she got into bed, turned out the light, and pulled the cover up to her chin. And the wee voice beside her said, "Ah, nobody here but us."
Good evening. You know, it's always nice to get a new guitar. And I got a new guitar for tonight. Some of you may remember last year I used an acoustic guitar. This year I've gone up in the world. I have an electric guitar. And it sounds really nice. because I think this song really needs an electric guitar. It's such a moody sound and a lovely sound, especially for a love song. And that's what I'm going to start off with, because after all, isn't Halloween really all about love? I hold your hand in mine, dear. I press it to my lips. I take a healthy bite of your dainty fingertips. My joy would be complete, dear, if you were only here. But still I keep your hand as a precious souvenir. The night you died, I cut it off. I really don't know why. For now, each time I kiss it, I get blood stains on my tie. Ugh. I'm sorry now I killed you, for our love was something fine. But till they come and get me, I will hold your hand in mine. Now, the one thing I do regret about this night is that I don't get to leave right away. I do want to spend some time with my wife. I like to hold her hand, too.
Hello, my name is Mary Frazier, and I'm a children's librarian at the Monroe County Public Library. And I'm bringing you a story tonight that was collected by the Brothers Grimm. You've all heard of the Brothers Grimm, I'm sure. If you didn't know about them before, you know about them since the TV show. This story features a tree. And some of you may have this plant, this tree, in your yard at home. You should look for it tomorrow. Now, yours may be trailing along the ground, all stunted and small, but these grow big. They can be tall columns, or they can have spreading branches. They can be tortured little bonsais. They're all over the world and have been for thousands of years. People have used their berries in food and for medicine. The Druids used to light their branches and use the smoke to bring about visions. They've been in people's homes to ward off thieves and to draw love. My story is called The Juniper Tree. Many years ago, maybe even 1,000 years ago, there was a wealthy man who was married to a young and beautiful wife. They loved each other dearly and were very happy, except, of course, for one thing. They both wanted a child, and they had none. Now, they lived in a large stone house that was surrounded by a courtyard, and in the center of the courtyard, there grew a tall, spreading juniper tree. And the young wife loved that tree and spent many happy hours sitting beneath it in all kinds of weather through all the seasons. Now, one day she was beneath the tree peeling an apple on a winter's day when her knife slipped and she pricked her thumb and a few drops of blood fell there on the white snow. And she said, "Oh, if only I could have a child as white as the snow and as red as blood, then I should be happy." Well, spring followed winter and summer followed spring, and these were happy times for this young woman because as it came about, she was going to have a baby. But when autumn came, she became melancholy. And one day as she was out picking berries from the tree, she suddenly was overcome with a premonition. And she called her husband to her and she said, "If I should die, bury me here beneath the juniper tree." Not long after that, she gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. His skin was as white as snow, his lips were as red as blood, and she loved him dearly for a few days. When he was only a few days old, his mother died. And her husband mourned, he cried, he buried her beneath the tree as she had wished. But soon he dried his tears, and in time he married again. And his new wife gave him a daughter. Her name was Anne Marie. And the new wife loved her daughter beyond all things in the world, as much as she hated the son of the first wife. She loathed the boy. She wanted all of the worldly goods of her husband to come to her and her child, and nothing to go to the boy. And so when he came into the house, she would prick him, and she would punch him, and she would pinch him, and she would box his ears, and she harried him around the house so that the poor thing could find no place to have any peace at all. One autumn, one crisp, clear autumn, when all of the apples had been harvested, little Anne Marie came to her mother one day and asked if she might have an apple. And her mother said, "Of course you may. Come with me, my child." And she took her into her storeroom, where she had a large chest filled with apples. Now it was a heavy wooden chest with a heavy lid, and it was bound around by iron with a sharp iron hasp where the lock was on the chest. And she opened up the chest and chose a perfect apple for her perfect daughter. But just then she looked out the window, and she could see the boy headed home, and she hated that boy, and she was overcome with her anger and hatred for him. And she took the apple away from her daughter and put it back with the others and closed the lid, and she said, "Anne Marie, you run, go play. When your brother comes home, then you shall both have an apple, and you can eat them together." And so little Anne Marie did as her mother said and went on her way to play. And the mother waited there in the doorway. And when the boy came in, she said, "Hello, my son. How would you like a nice, crisp apple?" And he said, "Oh, yes, Mother, I would. I would love to have an apple." And she said, "Then come with me." And she took him into the storeroom, and she opened up that heavy lid on that cask full of apples. And she said, "Go ahead. You look inside and choose your apple." And when the little boy leaned over to choose an apple, she slammed that lid down, and that sharp, heavy hasp severed his little neck, and his head rolled out into the apples. And as soon as it was done, the very moment it was done, she was overcome with guilt and terror unless someone should find out what she had done. And so she searched about, and she found a scarf, and she set the body up, propped up on a stool against the door, and she wrapped the scarf around the head, trying to set it back onto the neck and balance it there. And she put an apple in the dead boy's hand. And after a while, little Anne Marie came to her mother, and she said, "Mother, brother has an apple, and I asked him to give it to me, but he didn't answer. He was so pale and strange, it quite frightened me." And her mother said, "Nonsense. You go back and tell your brother to give you that apple, and if he refuses, you box his ears." So little Anne Marie did as her mother said. She went back and asked for the apple again. And of course her brother was silent and said nothing. So she reached up and tapped him on the ear. And when she did, his head rolled off his body and rolled down onto the floor. And the child screamed, and she ran to her mother in tears and told her what had happened. And her mother bent down and took her by the shoulders, and she said, "Anne Marie, what have you done?" But never mind. What's done is done and can't be undone. You go on your way, and I will take care of this. And her way of taking care of it was to put the boy in the stew she was making for supper. Well, that evening, the father came in, and the first thing he did was look around for his son and ask about him. And she said, "Oh, him, he's probably gone to visit his uncle." And the father said, "What, he went away without telling me goodbye?" And she said, "Oh, don't worry about him. He's with his uncle. I'm sure all is well." And all little Anne-Marie could do was shiver in terror and cry. Well, the father sat down to the table for his dinner, and she ladled up thick black stew into the bowl and put it before him. Anne-Marie had none of it, and neither did the mother, but the father ate it, and oh, he loved it. He said it was the best thing he had eaten. He ate and he ate. He ate again bowls and bowls and bowls of that stew until he had eaten it all up. And poor little Anne-Marie just cried and cried until finally she crept away from the table. She went into her room and found a perfect piece of white, pure silk. And then she went and found her brother's bones where her mother had discarded them and wrapped them up in that white silk and took it out and laid the bundle beneath the juniper tree. And when she did that, that tree began to sway back and forth, and it unfurled its branches, and they came together and apart and together, just like a person clapping for joy. And then a cloud of some kind of smoke or mist came out of the tree, and when it parted, she could see flames. There was a fire that burned, but the tree was not consumed. And suddenly, out of the fire, a bird flew up with magnificent plumage, singing a beautiful song, and it flew away in the evening air. And then the smoke cleared, and the fire was gone. And when she looked down, the little bundle of bones was gone as well. And she felt a little bit lighter in heart, and she went back in and sat down and had some bread and butter with her mother and her father. Now that bird flew on into the village, and it stopped at the house of the jeweler, and it perched up on top of his house, and it began to sing a song, in bird song, of course, but if they could understand it, they would have heard this. My mother butchered me, my father ate me, my sister little Anne-Marie, she gathered up the bones of me and wrapped them in a silken cloth, laid beneath the juniper tree. Oh, what a lovely bird am I. Well, the jeweler heard this amazing bird song, and he jumped up from his workbench, carrying a gold chain in one hand and his tools in the other, still with his leather apron on, and ran out into the street and looked up, and he said, "Bird, bird, what a beautiful song. Sing it again for me." But the bird would not. It would not sing again for free with no payment. And so the jeweler offered up the golden chain, and the bird came down and grasped it in his right claw and flew back up to the top of the house and sang the song again. And when he was done, he flew away. Next, the bird went to the house of the cobbler and perched on the peaked roof of the cobbler's house. And he sang the beautiful song again. And on the first notes, the cobbler ran out to listen, and he called for his wife and daughter, and they came just as the song was finishing. And he said, "Bird, bird, please, you must sing that song again for my wife and my child to hear." But the bird would not sing again, not for no payment. And so he said to his little girl, "Go inside and get those red slippers that I just finished, the special ones. Bring them to me." And the little girl ran inside and brought back a beautiful pair of red shoes. And the cobbler offered them up to the bird, who came down and grasped them in his left claw and flew back up to the top of the house and sang, "My mother butchered me, my father ate me, my sister little Anne-Marie, she gathered up the bones of me and wrapped them in a silken cloth to lay beneath the juniper tree. Ah, what a lovely bird am I." And the bird flew away. And it flew way out to the edge of the village, where the river flowed through the mill. And there were several millers out hacking away, trying to form a new millstone from a piece of stone. They had made a hole in the circle to fit into the mill. And they were working away when the bird perched up on the roof of the mill and began to sing, "My mother butchered me." And one of the millers left off working and went out to listen. "My father ate me." Two more followed out to listen. "My sister, little Anne Marie, she gathered up the bones of me." All but one went out to listen to the bird's song and wrapped them in a silken cloth to lay beneath the juniper tree. And the last miller came out to hear the song. "Ah, what a lovely bird am I." And the last man said, "Oh, bird, bird, please, you must sing that song again. I didn't hear it all." But the bird would not. It would not sing again, not without payment. And the millers got together and they talked. They had worked all day to hew this stone into a millstone, and it was big and it was heavy, but it was all they had, and they offered it to the bird. And the bird flew down and stuck its head through the hole in the millstone and then flew up to the roof of the mill with that heavy stone around its neck and perched there and sang the song one last time. And when it was finished, the bird flew back home. Now back at home, the father and the mother and little Anne Marie were sitting there around the table when they heard something light on the roof of the house. And they heard the song begin, "My mother butchered me." And the woman began to claw at her clothes. She said, "Oh, my fingers are like ice, but inside I feel like I'm on fire." "My father ate me." The father said, "What is that? What is that wonderful sound?" And he went outside, and as soon as he went out the door, the bird dropped that golden chain, and it circled around the father's neck. It was perfect. And he ran inside and he said, "Look, the bird has given me this gift. Isn't it magnificent?" And the woman said, "No, no." And she stopped up her ears and closed her eyes. "No, I don't want to hear. I don't want to know." "My sister, little Anne Marie, she gathered up the bones of me." And Anne Marie said, "Let me go outside. What did the bird get for me?" And she ran out, and as soon as she did, the bird let go of those red slippers, and they fell at the child's feet. And she put them on and danced inside, and her heart was light for the first time that day. And wrapped them in a silken cloth to lay beneath a juniper tree. And the woman now was writhing in agony on the floor, ripping at her clothes, tearing at the neck of her bodice, and she said, "I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Even if it bring about the end of the world, I must go outside for some air." And as soon as she crossed the threshold of the house, the bird dropped the millstone onto that wicked woman, and she was crushed to death. And the man and his daughter heard the terrible noise, and they went out to see what had happened, and there were flames and smoke coming up from where the woman had been killed. And then there was nothing, no flames, no stone, no woman, no bird. But there was the little boy. And he took his father by the hand, and he took his sister by the hand, and they went back into the house together. And they all, each of them, had a nice, crisp apple. Ah, what a lovely bird am I. The juniper tree. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Matlack. I'm an educator, a storyteller, and a veterinarian. I was born and raised in Indiana, spent quite a bit of time in Florida, but I got home as soon as I could. Now, it was down in Florida where I cut my teeth on storytelling, and my wife and I had a small animal veterinary practice. Now, in Florida, most of our clients were retirees. Elderly people tend to have elderly pets, but we very much enjoyed taking care of the senior citizens in their golden years. I particularly remember the Dedemeyers. Mrs. Dedemeyer was a petite, spry woman, sharp as a tack. Mr. Dedemeyer was a huge man, jolly. They had a tiny little poodle named Killam. Mr. Dedemeyer adored Killam. Killam adored Mr. Dedemeyer. They were always together. He went everywhere with her, frequently bringing her into the office for the slightest little thing or just coming in for a visit, and we very much enjoyed that. But one day, Mr. Dedemeyer died. A couple weeks later, Mrs. Dedemeyer called the office to tell us that Killam had died in her sleep of a broken heart, she said. Now, a few weeks after that, the Dedemeyer's son from up in New York called the office to set up an appointment for his mother and her new dog. We made it for the next day. We couldn't wait to see Mrs. Dedemeyer's new dog. In her usual form, she was a little early for her appointment. She opened the door, and in came bounding an enormous, attack-trained Doberman Pinscher. The kids had pitched together money to buy this dog as a guardian and a companion for their mother. He was a magnificent creature, obviously well-trained, and in time, they got along famously. He was a wonderful companion for her. Now, that next summer, we were sitting around the clinic. It was a rather lazy summer day, just chatting, when suddenly we heard this screeching of tires out in the parking lot. We looked, and there was the Dedemeyer's Lincoln Continental. Mrs. Dedemeyer popped out of the driver's side, ran around to the other side, opened the back passenger door, and I don't know how she did it, but that 80-year-old woman scooped up that 90-pound Doberman and brought him to the door. We opened the door, helped her in, plopped him down. What happened? I don't know. I got back from the grocery and found him like this. He was slobbering, foaming, gasping for air, and he was turning blue. I knew I wouldn't have long to save him. I explained what I needed to do. I needed to take him in the back, put him up on the procedure table, and retrieve whatever he was choking on. She said, "Oh, do what you need to do, doctor. I need to go home and unpack the groceries. There's still some in the trunk. The ice cream is melting." She just didn't want to be there. She was out of her mind. She was so close to that dog. Well, we scooped him up, brought him back to the procedure table, and at this point he was beginning to thrash. He was in that state where he just wanted some air but could not get it. And I knew I would have to sedate him. I drew up some short-acting barbiturate. My assistant, Elena, held off his massive arm. The vein popped up. It took the rest of the crew holding him as he was thrashing. I hit the vein, pushed in that barbiturate, and he nodded off. We propped him up. Elena held up that massive jaw. I lowered the lower jaw, pulled out his tongue, and as soon as I saw what he was choking on, I said, "Joyce," that's our receptionist, "Joyce, you get on the phone. Call the sheriff. Get him over to the Dedemeyer place now." Now, it just so happened that a sheriff's deputy was in the area at the time, and he arrived at the Dedemeyer place at the same time that Mrs. Dedemeyer had returned home. They opened the front door there in the living room, next to a sack of broken groceries, were spots of blood. They followed those spots of blood into a hallway, down the hallway, into a bedroom, to a closet door. The sheriff opened that closet door, and there, cowering on the floor, clutching a bleeding hand, was a burglar. You see, what I pulled out of that dog's throat were 2 fingers. Now, I fancy myself a man of integrity and honesty, and that story came about by walking through a front door. It was not the dog coming through the door of our clinic. It was me walking through the front door of a library, going to 398.2, the Folklore Collection, Urban Legends. You can find it there. It's called The Choking Doberman. Thank you.
You know, I can't believe it. Somebody did not like the song I did last time. I mean, I really don't understand it. There was this woman, she came up to me, she took offense at it. I mean, this is written by it was written by a mathematics professor in 1958. The songs I do are by a mathematics professor named Tom Lear. They're great songs. They're funny songs. They're good Halloween songs, and she didn't like it. She came up and she read me the riot act. Almost tempted not to do the next song. But she said she was going to curse my new guitar. I'm proud of it. It's a beautiful sounding guitar. My God. It's a banjo. I don't play the banjo, but it sounds good for the song. About a maid I sing a song, sing rickety-tickety-tin. About a maid I sing a song who did not have her family long. Not only did she do them wrong, she did every one of them in. She did every one of them in. Her mother she could never stand, sing rickety-tickety-tin. Her mother she could never stand, and if she did not, so a cyanide soup she planned. Her mother died with a spoon in her hand, and her face in a hideous grin, her face in a hideous grin. See what it does to me to hear a banjo instead of my nice new guitar. One morning in a fit of pique, sing rickety-tickety-tin. One morning in a fit of pique, she drowned her father in the creek. The water tasted bad for a week, and we had to make do with gin. We had to make do with gin. She set her sister's hair on fire, sing rickety-tickety-tin. She set her sister's hair on fire, and as the smoke and flames grew higher, she danced around the funeral pyre, playing a violin, playing a violin. She weighted her brother down with stones, saying rickety-tickety-tin. She weighted her brother down with stones and sent him off to Davy Jones. All they ever found was some bones and occasional pieces of skin, occasional pieces of skin. One day when she had nothing to do, sing rickety-tickety-tin. One day when she had nothing to do, she cut her baby brother in two and served him up as an Irish stew, and invited the neighbors in, invited the neighbors in. And when at last the police came by, saying rickety-tickety-tin, and when at last the police came by, her little prank she did not deny, for to do so she would have had to lie. And lying she knew was a sin, a sin. Lying she knew was a sin. My tragic tale I won't prolong, sing rickety-tickety-tin. My tragic tale I won't prolong. And if you did not enjoy my song, you've yourselves to blame if it's too long. You should never have let me begin. Should never have let me begin.
In the Low Countries of the Carolinas, both north and south, there are evil creatures, witches, who take on a human form during the day so that they can meld in with the humankind, so that they can find their way into the lives and the homes of humans. These creatures are known as boo-hags. But in the night, they rid themselves of their human disguise and head off towards the swamps to be with their own kind, to be with their boo-daddies. And the moral of this story is that someone you know and love, someone sitting right next to you at this moment, could in fact be a boo-hag. The people of the Carolinas know them and fear them so greatly. They know there is only one way to prevent these creatures from coming into their lives, from coming into their homes, and that is to paint their window shades, their window edges, the windows of the door edges, a bright blue. And if you've been to the Low Countries of the Carolinas, you've seen that there is blue paint on every door frame and every window frame as you drive along. It's the only way to keep them from your life. And our story features a newly married couple. They were new to their home as well, even though it was very old. And the groom thought that every door frame and window frame was painted blue. He was almost right. It was in the dead of night that the man was awakened by a sound. Startled, he sat up straight in bed, and the first thing he noticed was that his young bride was not by his side. Worried that she was ill and in need of help, he got up and searched the house. It didn't take long. It wasn't a very big house. And the last thing he checked, not finding her, was to climb up this ladder to the attic. There was nothing up there, but he noticed a door, a huge door that was unlatched and open, swinging in the night wind. It was a big door for bringing trunks and heavy pieces of furniture from the outside up into the attic. And so he pulled it to and latched it. And he went back to the bedroom and he sat on the bed and he fell asleep. He'd been working all day in the sugar fields and he was exhausted. And he was awake again at dawn, and there she was by his side. She didn't say anything about being gone all night, so he didn't say anything either. They had breakfast as usual, and he headed out at his regular time to head to the sugar cane fields, but he didn't stay at work. He told the foreman that he was ill, feeling poorly, gonna go home. But he didn't head home. He found a tree along the riverbank, and he leaned back against that tree, and he napped on and off all day long, so that night when he went home, he could stay awake and find out what his wife was doing in the middle of the night. He came home at the usual time, and she had a meal prepared for him, and they ate and talked about this and that, but then he made a big production of yawning and stretching and saying how he was going to go to bed early, and she waved him on. "Oh, you should do that. You go on, dear. I'll be up later." And so he climbed those stairs into his bed, and he lay there trying to pretend like he was asleep. Now, I don't know if you've ever tried this, but you have to get that breathing just right, shallow and even. You have to relax your face, and he struggled to make his eyelids not flutter to give himself away, for he could hear her coming up the stairs. She did not get in bed beside him. She came around to his side of the bed, and she leaned over him. He could feel her breath. He could sense her watching, and so he pretended. And it must have worked, because soon she left the room and he heard her descending the stairs once again, and in a flash he was up out of that bed, and in his sock feet he quietly made his way down the stairs. He had seen her just turn into the living room, so he stood at the base of the stairs, just barely peering around the edge of the opening to that living room. And he could see quite clearly. Even though there was no light on, he could see because there was a full moon, and there were no curtains on their windows yet, and there was no furniture in there at all, except for one piece of furniture that she had brought to the wedding, to the marriage. It was an old ashwood spinning wheel. And he watched as his beautiful bride stood there beside that spinning wheel and did a most unusual thing. She reached down to the hem of her cotton nightgown, and then she pulled it up over her head and dropped the nightgown onto the floor so that she stood there, stark naked. But that's not the strange part. She sat on that spinning wheel, and she put her foot on the pedal and began to push it up and down and up and down, and that made the spinning wheel turn, but there was no yarn on this spinning wheel. And there in the moonlight he watched as she raised her hand up to that spindle. And she reached her hand and she began to pull on one finger as if pulling off a glove, and the skin came loose. And she put that loose skin finger up against the spindle and continued to push up and down and up and down, and the flesh of her finger caught on the spindle and pulled away the flesh from her hand, from her arm, from her neck, from her face, and round her sack of skin wound around that spindle into one big bloody mass of skin until she sat there like a butchered side of beef. And now, without her eyelids, with the sinews so close to the top, with the blood vessels pulsing, he saw her and involuntarily gagged in the back of his throat. And she turned and looked in his direction. But he thought he got back just in time. And quick as he could, he ran up those stairs as quietly as he could, and he dove under the covers. And this time he had much more trouble trying to make his breath even, trying to keep his face calm as he heard her ascending the stairs. Again, she came into the room. She came around. He heard the wet slapping sound of her footsteps coming around the side of the bed until again she peered over. He could hear her breathing. He could sense her there, and he felt the light drip, drip, drip of something falling on his covers. But he held himself still, for he knew that his life depended upon it. And she must have been convinced, or in a hurry, for she left him there. And this time he heard her not descend the stairs, but head toward the attic. Again, he was out of bed, and he saw just in time her feet disappearing up that ladder into the attic. And he followed, climbing that ladder too, careful not to put his hands where she had just been. As he pulled himself up over the edge of the floorboards, he could see that she'd gone over to that door. She'd unlatched it and pushed it wide, and it was so tall and so wide that she was able to stand there and stretch her arms out. And in this manner he watched as his bride launched herself into the night sky, and she flew once around the house, checking to make sure she wasn't observed, and then he saw her fly off over the town into the direction of the swamps, to be with her own kind. And so great was her evil, as she flew over that town, in sleeping houses below, milk that was fresh curdled and turned bad. So great was her evil that cats turned against their masters and tried to scratch them in the night. So great was her evil that wounds that had begun to heal broke open and began to bleed again. And he knew that he was lucky to have discovered what he was living with so early on. And yet, this was his bride. And so he sat there kneeling in that open door, and he wept for the loss of his young bride. But then he knew. Drying his eyes, he knew what he had to do. And the first thing he did was head out to the shed and get that bucket of blue paint. He came up to the attic and he painted the outside of that frame. And then he closed it and latched it. Now painted shut against her, she would never find a way into that house again. But downstairs, a more dire task awaited him at the spinning wheel. And he stood there looking at that mass of skin on the spindle. He didn't know where it began or where it ended, but he began to fish around inside until he caught a hold of something, and he began to unwind it round and round until finally it was unwound and heavy. Holding it on his fingertips, he took that heavy sack of skin into the kitchen, where he got a bag of salt and another of hot cayenne pepper. And he dumped them deep down into that sack of skin and shook it around so that it was coated all inside. And then he took that horrid thing out the door onto his back porch, and he hung it on a hook, and then went inside to await her return. He lit a lamp there on his kitchen table, and he sat there looking out the window in the direction that she had flown, and he waited all night long. And it wasn't until dawn was just showing its first colors that he saw a speck on the horizon. She was coming towards the house. As she got closer and closer, first thing she did was go around to that door. And then when she saw it painted shut against her, she screamed like a mountain lion. And then she came racing around the house, and she saw that sack of skin there on the porch. She landed, crouched in all her 4 paws. She looked around, sniffing the air, gonna find that man, gonna kill him. But first she had to get that sack back on, because the sunlight would do her in. And so she lifted off that sack of skin and she sniffed at it. But she couldn't smell that salt or that pepper deep inside. And so she started putting it on, first one leg, then the other. And she was just starting to fix her face back on her skull when she felt the burn of salt and pepper on raw flesh. And she screamed like an animal caught in the fire. And she started to scrape at her own flesh, trying to remove it, trying to get out of it. And blood poured down her body and pooled on the floorboards. And the man, the husband inside behind the window, just watched and waited. She knew the only help she would get was from her own kind over the swamps. And so she turned in that direction, and shakily she launched herself into the air again, and she flew to her swamps. And when she got over there, the sun was far too high, and she began to spin wildly out of control. And then she exploded into thousands of pieces of little bits of bone and meat and sinew and flesh, and it rained down out of the sky and plopped into the swamps below. And you can bet that morning in the Carolinas, the alligators ate well. And that's the end of the Boohey. Sweet little tale. A nice little cheery little. I like my stories gory. Thank you, Stephanie Holman.
A veritable culinary network of food network of tasty stories we're having tonight. Hi, I'm Patty Callison, and the story that I have to tell you tonight is one that I have been investigating, trying to find out the truth of it all. And at this point, I can't say whether this is a true story or not, but sometimes you just have to enjoy the truth that is in a story. Now, Lacima Prison sits in a remote the end of a 20-mile-long dirt road. Built of concrete, this prison is one of the special ones meant to house those that society wants to forget. The criminally insane. Now, in 1936, there was a man named James Callahan who came to Lacima. And yes, he was mad, quite deranged and insane, having wrecked a trail of murder and mayhem across California. He was finally cornered in a small cave on the Pacific coast. And when they finally cornered him, his eyes were afire. And under his nails, they found human flesh. Yes, he was quite mad. And being mad, when they sentenced him, he received a sentence of life without any possibility of parole. But he would not go to the gas chamber. And so, James Callahan started to serve his lifelong sentence. Now, he may have been mad. He might have been deranged, but he had one perfectly sane thought. He wanted to be free. He wanted to escape from this prison that held him. And so he spent many a night and many a day thinking about how he could escape. He spent 12 years digging a tunnel underneath a loose stone in his cell. 12 years digging a tunnel that finally ended when he hit stone that he could not possibly get through with the stolen spoon. But that didn't stop him from thinking about what he could do. And he would spend his evenings thinking obsessively about how he could escape. Finally, after 17 years at Lacima Prison, James Callahan came up with a plan. But he couldn't do it by himself. No, he needed a confederate. He needed someone to help him. And not just anyone. He needed Ben Jenkins. Now, Ben Jenkins had been at Lacima even longer than James Callahan. And he'd been a good prisoner, good enough that he'd become a trustee and could go outside the prison gates. Trustful enough that he was the prison gardener and the undertaker. So, after many conversations, furtive pleading by James Callahan, Ben Jenkins agreed to help James Callahan escape. It was not an easy plan. You see, when a prisoner died at Lacima Prison, as they frequently did, there was a certain procedure that always happened. The bells would toll, and Ben would take the body to the chapel and put it in a plain pine box. Put the lid on it. And then the next morning, Ben and the warden would load that pine box onto a horse-drawn cart. And the horse-drawn cart would take the coffin, the body, out to the cemetery, which was beyond the walls of the prison. And then they would put the coffin into the grave which Ben had dug, and after the warden signed off on the burial, he would return, and Ben would be left to cover the body with dirt and stones in the cemetery. And so a plan was made whereby, with the next death, James Callahan would sneak into the chapel, climb into the coffin with the corpse, and be taken to freedom by Ben. The only thing to do now was to wait and wait and wait. December came, and amazingly, no one had died. James Callahan could barely contain his agitation, his excitement. It would have to happen sometime. It would happen sometime. And he would wait, and he would be free. Finally, February came with the ferocity of a Pacific Ocean winter that would chill the bones. And on a day in February, the bells began to toll. And James Callahan knew that his plan was about to take form, was going to follow the death of one of the prisoners. And so, that evening, he snuck away from the work detail he'd been on in the prison, and he crawled into the dark chapel. He crawled quietly, silently across the floor. And yes, there they were, the two benches that would hold the coffin. Carefully, he lifted the lid, feeling his way in the dark. He climbed into the coffin and settled himself on the somewhat squishy and sweet-smelling corpse that already resided in the coffin. And then he pulled the lid down after himself. It was a long night, but his excitement and terror at being in the coffin with the body was nothing to what freedom would be for him. And then he could sense it. Movement after that long night. And then he felt it. The coffin being moved, slid along into what he could imagine was the cart with the horse. And then he could feel this gentle jostling as the coffin, carried by the horse and the cart, was taken out of the gates of La Cima prison to the cemetery, where, after the warden left, old Ben Wood set him free. Oh, he could barely keep crawling as he felt the coffin lowered down, 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 until it moved no more. Any time now, Ben would let him out. But then he heard something a little disturbing. Swoosh, thud, swoosh, thud. Earth being put onto the top of the coffin. Well, maybe the port warden hadn't signed off and left yet, and Ben had to do something. Swish, thud, swish, thud. The sound continued until there was nothing but the quiet of earth. Ben? Come on, Ben! Ben, let me out! Let me out! And James Callahan begged for Ben to uncover the coffin and let him out. The air grew hot and thin in the coffin. Please, please let me out. But nothing. And in his mind, James Callahan thought, and the joke that he'd become a part of became clear to him. And he reached into his pocket and pulled out matches, and in that little space, he struck the match. Looking over his shoulder, he looked into the dead eyes of Ben Jenkins. And that is the story of The Last Escape. You've been a wonderful, wonderful group tonight, and we thank you. We hope you have enjoyed this evening and the stories and songs that we've had for you this year. We also, the Bloomington Storytellers Guild and the Monroe County Public Library, invite you in February to our winter telling. So watch for that. I think it's February the 9th. I should find that out since I'm in charge of it. So we invite you all to come hear stories for adults and young adults again at the Monroe County Public Library in their newly renovated, beautiful auditorium. And so, happy Halloween, and we hope to see you next year. Goodbye.